Tobias Redmont sat in the dim light of his cabin, a single lantern flickering on the rough-hewn table, the shadows dancing like specters along the walls. Outside, the storm lashed against the wooden shutters, rain pounding like the frantic heart of a hunted animal. In the fireplace, embers glowed red, crackling as he tightened a knot in the bridle reins, the leather worn and familiar under his fingers. Peace had been a distant memory for 8 years, but now the urgent, desperate knocking at the door echoed in the hollow silence of his solitude. He froze, the leather slipping from his grasp. No one came to his ranch anymore, not since he buried his family. The knocking grew more frantic, interspersed with voices speaking a language he hadn't heard in years. Apache. A chill crept down his spine, tight and cold. The last time he had heard that tongue, it had been his wife pleading for mercy, his daughter's laughter cut short by violence. His hand brushed against the rifle mounted above the mantel, instinct urging him to protect what little remained of his life. But the voices were not war cries. They were strained, full of desperation. He hesitated, wrestling with the instinct to retreat into his own dark memories. Maybe it was the pleading in their tones, or perhaps the wind carrying their words through the door. Whatever it was, it broke through the barrier of his carefully constructed isolation. He stepped forward, each footfall heavy with trepidation, until his palm pressed against the solid oak of the door. "Please," a voice called, sharper now, the urgency palpable. "We need shelter just for tonight." His stomach turned. The world beyond his fence was violent, unforgiving, but the plea bore no hint of aggression. It was the sound of survival. "I can't," he murmured to himself, memories of the past flooding back unbidden, memories of kindness, of Sarah's gentle insistence that strangers were simply friends he hadn't met yet. "Please," the voice again, more desperate this time. "They are coming. If you do not help us, we will die here. And when they find our bodies at your gate, you will die too." The weight of the iron bar securing the door felt insurmountable. Yet, as he stood there, palms slick against the wood, he realized that the storm outside was not the most dangerous force at play. It was the approaching riders. The knowing pressed against his heart like a vice. He was not just protecting himself, he was sealing a fate not yet written. Taking a breath that tasted of ash and fear, Tobias lifted the bar. Rust crumbled under his fingers, and the door creaked open, revealing a group of 10 women, huddled together against the rain. Their traditional dresses, tattered and soiled, clung to their bodies like the shadows of their pasts. The youngest among them, no more than 16, held a bundle close, a baby barely breathing. The oldest woman possessed a wisdom born of hardship, silver threads lacing her dark hair, eyes haunted yet unyielding. "I am Ayana," the one who had spoken said, stepping forward despite her injuries, a cut above her left eye trickling crimson down her cheek. "These are my sisters, my daughters, my people. We have been running for 3 days." Tobias opened his mouth to ask questions that churned in his mind. Where had they come from? Why were they hunted? But the sight of the child silenced him. Some things mattered more than answers. "Come in," he found himself saying, his voice as rough as the weathers outside, stepping back into the warmth of his small abode. As the women rushed past him, he felt the atmosphere shift. 8 years of solitude had hollowed out his home, but it felt impossibly small now. They carried with them the sense of rain and fear, the metallic tang of blood that was not entirely their own. He could hardly bear the burden of their presence, yet it was a weight he invited into his heart. Ayanna was the last to enter, her expression transforming as she surveyed their sanctuary. "The soldiers who hunt us are not far behind," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Maybe an hour, maybe less. They will not stop until every one of us is dead." The door shut behind her with a soft click, sealing them in as Tobias glanced at the women now clustered by the fireplace, tending to wounds and whispering comfort. The warm glow of the fire flickered across their faces, illuminating their resolve even amid despair. They appeared as survivors, not warriors, but he sensed beneath the surface an undercurrent of fierce determination. "Why are they hunting you?" Tobias asked, turning to Ayanna, who stood with an air of quiet authority. Her gaze met his, and he saw something he recognized: the familiar pain of loss. "Because we ran instead of dying quietly," she stated, her voice a firm whisper. "Because we chose to live when they expected us to accept death." The sound of horses in the distance echoed ominously, accompanied by low voices that reverberated through the storm. The realization struck Tobias. These women were not cowering refugees. They were warriors who had fought back when their village burned, who had survived against all odds. "How many are coming?" Tobias pressed, urgency igniting within him. 8, maybe 10, she answered, her eyes narrowing. "Led by a captain named Morrison. He has been hunting Apache villages for months, claiming we are hostile. But his true enemy is anyone who might report what kind of man he truly is." Outside, the men approached, cloaked in darkness. Tobias moved to the window, peering through the rain-slicked glass. The horsemen rode like shadows, their silhouettes merging with the night, a dark tide against the flickering glow of his home. The sound of hooves thudded against the ground, a heartbeat of impending doom that quickened the pulse in his throat. "The lantern," Ayanna urged, her voice low but edged with urgency. "We cannot let them see us." Tobias nodded, moving instinctively to extinguish the flame that had become a comforting companion in his solitude. He snuffed it out, plunging the room into near darkness, the only light now a dim glow from the remnants of the dying fire. The shift was palpable, a transition from safety to primal awareness, and he could feel the women press closer together, instinctively forming a protective circle. "What do we do?" he asked, scanning their faces, seeking guidance in the chaos. Ayanna's expression remained resolute, the flicker of fear masked by the steel of determination. "Hold your breath and wait," she instructed, her voice barely above a whisper. "They will not expect us to resist." The pounding of hooves grew louder, the voices clearer, shouted commands, coarse laughter rippling through the rain. Tobias glanced at the window again, heart racing as he caught sight of the men dismounting, their figures outlined against the moonlight that broke through the clouds for a fleeting moment. Each one wore uniforms that hung like a second skin, adorned with badges that gleamed, symbols of authority and brutality. The youngest woman, still clutching her baby, whimpered softly, her eyes wide and glistening in the dark. Tobias felt an urgent surge of protectiveness for these women, each one a thread in a tapestry of survival woven from desperation. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to come in," he whispered fiercely, though doubt coiled within him. "What if they find us?" "They will find us if we make a sound," Ayanna replied, her gaze steady, anchoring him in the swirling storm of fear. "But if we are quiet, if we are smart, we can take them by surprise." As if to punctuate her words, A loud rap against the door shattered the silence, causing the group to flinch collectively. "Open up!" a voice bellowed from the other side, edged with malice. "We know you're in there. You have nowhere to run." The women exchanged terrified glances, breath held tight, hearts drumming a wild rhythm. Tobias's mind raced. He could run, flee through the back, let the storm swallow him whole. But the weight of the responsibility was a chain around his ankles. "What if we hide?" he suggested, desperate for a plan that wouldn't end in slaughter. "No," Ayanna interjected sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Hiding is surrender. We must fight." Outside, the captain's laughter cut through the air, harsh and mocking. "You think you can outsmart us? You're just a bunch of scared women. Come out and face your fate." The words stung, igniting a fire in Tobias's chest, a sense of righteousness that swelled alongside the growing dread. He glanced at the women, their resolve beginning to mirror the steel of Ayanna's gaze, and he felt his own fears cracking under the pressure of their shared determination. In that moment, he knew he was not merely sheltering them from the storm, he was standing on the precipice of something vast and terrifying, a choice that could alter everything. The grim resolve coiled within him, and he stepped forward, feeling the weight of the iron door against his back, no longer a barrier, but a gateway. "Let's show them what we're made of," he said, the conviction in his voice surprising even himself. Together. The captain outside laughed again, a chilling sound that clawed at the edges of their resolve. Tobias felt the heat of fury rise in him, igniting a flame against the cold grip of fear. He could almost hear the rain striking the roof like a drum roll, urging them toward action. Ayanna shifted closer, a glimmer of defiance sparking in her eyes. "We don't need weapons," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We have each other, and we know this place." Tobias's gaze fell to the rustic old tools hanging on the wall. Axes, sickles, and a rusted plowshare, relics of a hard life carved out of the land. Inspiration flickered like the last embers of the fire. "We can make them think twice," he murmured, pointing to the tools. "If we can get to the window, we can create a distraction." The women nodded, the weight of hope mingling with trepidation as they huddled closer. The youngest one's baby whimpered again, but Ayanna hushed her, pressing a finger to her lips. The storm outside roared, and in the sudden lull, Tobias caught the scent of wet earth mixed with something sharper. Fear, yes, but also a burgeoning sense of purpose. "Here's the plan," Ayanna said, her voice a whip crack of authority cutting through the tension. "We'll create a diversion. You," she pointed to the woman with the baby, "stay back with her. If it goes awry, you'll keep her safe." The woman nodded, her eyes wide but fierce, and Tobias felt a swell of admiration for her bravery. "Okay, everyone else, on my mark. Tobias, you're with me. We'll break the window and draw their attention away. The rest of you," she turned her eyes to the others, "get ready to move." Outside, the men were shouting again, voices laced with impatience, thrumming like an angry swarm of hornets. "You think you're clever, hiding in the shadows. We're coming in!" Tobias clenched his fists, the adrenaline coursing through him, sharpening his focus. "On three," Ayanna whispered, her breath steady despite the chaos. "1, 2. The pounding of hooves resumed, a relentless reminder of their pursuers' numbers. 3. In one swift motion, they lunged towards the window, shattering the glass with a deafening crash. Splinters flew, sparkling like stars caught in the night, and Tobias felt the rush of cold air kiss his skin. Instinctively, he turned to Ayana, and for a heartbeat, time slowed. Their eyes locked, a shared understanding sparking between them. A silent promise. With a battle cry, they launched themselves through the jagged opening, the chaos of the outside world engulfing them. The men were caught off guard, their shouts of surprise drowned by the storm and the sudden rush of tumult. "Over here!" Tobias yelled, waving his arms like a madman, his voice lost in the gusting wind, but enough to draw the attention of the nearest soldier. The man turned, confusion plastered on his face as the two of them sprinted away, weaving between the trees that lined the edge of the clearing. The thunder overhead rumbled a warning, and with it, the smell of rain-soaked earth rose, mingling with the tang of sweat and fear. Behind them, chaos erupted as the remaining women seized the moment to follow Ayana's lead. As Tobias ran, he could hear the soldiers' shouts turning frantic, the clatter of hooves scrambling to catch up. The world around him blurred, the cold rain piercing his skin, but he felt something new, a fierce exhilaration. They were alive, they were free, and for the first time, he realized that perhaps bravery was not the absence of fear, but the willing embrace of it, the choice to weave together their threads into something unbreakable. They burst into the thicket of trees, the dense underbrush swallowing them whole. Wet branches clawed at their clothes, and the ground squelched beneath their feet. But with every step, they carved a path deeper into the shadows, each heartbeat a drum of defiance. "Keep moving," Ayana urged, her voice a beacon amidst the disarray. The rain poured down, drenching them, and the air crackled with tension as they broke free of the clearing, leaving the dim glow of the cabin behind. Tobias glanced back, heart pounding as he caught a glimpse of the soldiers dismounting, their silhouettes stark against the fading light. "Where do we go?" he gasped, lungs burning as they veered left, deeper into the woods. The trees loomed overhead, their branches arching like guardians, and he felt an odd sense of comfort in their embrace. "We can't just run forever." Ayana's eyes flickered with determination, her face set like stone. "The creek is nearby through that grove," she said, nodding toward a cluster of tall pines that framed a narrow passage. "If we can reach it, we can cover our tracks." The distant shouts of their pursuers echoed, a cacophony that pushed them harder. Tobias felt the weight of the tools they'd left behind, the rusted plowshare that might have been a weapon, now a phantom in his mind. He glanced at Ayana, her resolve igniting something inside him, and he couldn't help but wonder if maybe they were more than just survivors. Maybe they were warriors. As they ducked into the grove, the sound of the rushing creek met them, a wild serenade competing with the storm. The water danced over rocks, silver streaks glinting in the twilight. "We'll need to cross," Ayana said, scanning the area for a safe passage. "The water will mask our scent." Tobias nodded, urgency propelling him forward. They waded into the cool rush, the icy shock stealing his breath. With every step, the current tugged at his legs, but he pushed through, knowing behind him was not just danger, but also the promise of a new beginning. As they reached the far bank, Tobias stumbled, catching himself on a gnarly root jutting from the mud. He looked back to see Ayana, crouched low, her silhouette stark against the dimming light. "We need to keep going," he urged, the words barely escaping his lips. "Just a moment," she whispered, staring into the shadows where the trees thickened. Then he heard it, a rustling, faint at first, but unmistakable. Footsteps. "They're close," he hissed, adrenaline surging again. Ayana's eyes narrowed, scanning the terrain. "We need to hide. Over there!" She gestured to a thicket of brambles clustered tightly against a fallen log. They slipped into the dense foliage, breathless, the prickly tendrils tugging at their clothes as they huddled down. As the sounds of pursuit grew nearer, Tobias clutched Ayana's arm, feeling the tension radiate between them. The rain's steady rhythm became a heartbeat of its own, drowning out the world beyond their hiding place. In that moment, enveloped by the dark embrace of the underbrush, they were not just two souls caught in a storm. They were a thread woven tightly together, ready to face whatever came next. The soldiers' voices drew closer, harsh and clipped, slicing through the rain-soaked air. "Search the creek!" one barked, his tone and order laced with urgency. "They couldn't have gone far." Tobias's heart thudded wildly, each beat echoing in the fragile silence of their hiding place. He exchanged a glance with Ayana, their breaths mingling in the cool dampness, and in that fleeting moment, a bond forged. In fear ignited a flicker of hope. "Do you hear that?" Ayana whispered, her brow furrowed. A faint sound, almost melodic, drifted through the trees, rising and falling like a distant lullaby. It felt out of place amidst the chaos, an eerie counterpoint to the soldiers' shouts. "Not now," Tobias murmured, his voice tight with restraint. "We can't be distracted." Yet the haunting tune tugged at the edges of his focus, weaving itself into the fabric of his thoughts. It felt like a warning and a promise all at once. The soldiers moved past, their figures blurring like shadows under the weight of the rain. Tobias held his breath, every instinct screaming for them to flee. But the melody persisted, drawing him back to the thicket. It was as if the forest itself was alive, whispering secrets only he could hear. Ayana turned her head, straining to listen, her expression shifting from anxiety to curiosity. "It's coming from over there," she pointed subtly, her eyes wide. "Maybe it's a sign, something to guide us." "Or a trap," Tobias countered, though uncertainty gnawed at him. The lure of the unknown pulled at his resolve, and he could feel the thread of bravery beginning to unravel. The melody grew louder, wrapping around them like a soft cloak. With a silent agreement, they edged closer, slipping through the bramble just as another shout cut through the air, a voice this time softer, laced with panic. "Where are they?" Before they could ponder the danger, Ayana led the way, fingers brushing against the rough bark of a nearby tree as they navigated further into the woods. The melody guided them, an ethereal presence weaving through the trees, beckoning them with an urgency that felt strangely familiar. Tobias hesitated, glancing back at the path they'd taken. The soldiers were regrouping, frustration evident in their voices. The rain faltered, momentarily parting to reveal patches of silver moonlight breaking through the clouds, illuminating the forest floor. "Follow me," Ayana said, her voice steady despite the chaos. She moved toward the source of the music, and Tobias felt the tension inside him both ease and heighten with every step. The air shifted, tinged with something ancient, a scent of moss and damp earth mixed with the sweetness of blooming wildflowers. Then they saw it, a clearing up ahead where the trees parted like curtains, unveiling a hidden stage. In its center, a small circular stone altar stood, draped with ferns and sprinkled with petals that shimmered under the moonlight. Above, the branches formed a natural canopy, sheltering this sacred place from the storm. Tobias's heart raced as they stepped into the clearing, the melody now a vibrant pulse that resonated deep within him. "What is this place?" he breathed, taking in the surreal beauty surrounding them. "I don't know," Ayana replied, awe etched across her face. "But it feels safe." The soldiers' voices faded, drowned by the crescendo of the tune, and for the first time since their escape, Tobias felt a sense of belonging, as if the very ground beneath them recognized their struggle and embraced their fight. They were not alone. The forest itself had woven them into its tapestry, threads of fate intertwining as they stood on the brink of something greater than themselves. "Whatever happens next," he said, turning to Ayana, "we face it together." She nodded, a fierce fire igniting in her gaze. "Together," she echoed, and in that moment they knew they would not merely survive. They would forge a new path, hand in hand, their fate entwined like the roots beneath their feet. The melody swelled, twisting around them like a serpent, and for a heartbeat, the world outside the clearing faded to a distant hum. Tobias could feel the pulse of the altar beneath his fingertips, a heartbeat that matched their own, echoing a rhythm older than time itself. The air shimmered, alive with possibility, and he caught sight of something glinting at the edge of the altar, a small ornate box, carved with intricate patterns that twisted like vines. "Look," Ayana breathed, stepping closer, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "What do you think it is?" Tobias crouched beside her, brushing away the fallen petals to reveal a latch that had long since lost its shine. His heart raced as he realized the box seemed to hum in time with the melody. "Only one way to find out," he said, his voice thick with anticipation. As he reached for the latch, the song crescendoed, filling the clearing with a surge of warmth and light. The moment his fingers closed around the cool metal, a jolt of energy shot through him, like lightning sparking across a stormy sky. He hesitated, doubt creeping into his mind, but the melody urged him on, a soft but insistent voice whispering promises of truth. "Together," Ayana reminded him, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Whatever it is, we can handle it." With a shared breath, they lifted the latch, the box creaking open with a sound like a sigh of relief. Inside, nestled among the soft velvet lining, lay a single thread of shimmering silver, coiled like a serpent waiting to be unspooled. It glittered under the moonlight, casting shadows that danced across their faces. "What is it?" Tobias asked, mesmerized by the way it caught the light. Ayana leaned closer, her brow furrowing in concentration. It feels like it's alive, like it's part of something much bigger." As she reached out to touch the thread, the melody shifted, weaving into an almost tangible tapestry of sound that wrapped around them. Suddenly, the world burst forth in flashes of memory, images of faces long gone, places once cherished. With each vision, Tobias felt an echo of their struggles, their victories, the sacrifices made by those who had come before. "A tapestry of stories," he whispered, realization dawning like the first light of dawn. "This is our connection to them, our past and maybe our future." The thread pulsed warmly in Ayana's hand, and she smiled, a fierce determination igniting in her eyes. "We can weave our own story into this." Tobias nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle upon them like a mantle of responsibility. "We'll honor theirs and create our own," he vowed, the gravity of their choice sinking in. But just as they steeled themselves for the journey ahead, a rustle broke the silence, drawing their attention back to the edge of the clearing. Shadows danced among the trees, and the soldiers' voices returned, urgent and searching. "They can't find us here," Tobias hissed, gripping Ayana's arm. "We have to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but her gaze held firm. "But we can't leave this behind." As the first figure emerged from the shadows, steel glinting in the meager light, Tobias knew they would have to make a choice. Run back to the chaos or embrace the thread of destiny that called to them from the altar.